So everybody's heard the phrase at this point, oh, football fell off, nothing's the same anymore, the sport is dying, and blah, blah, blah. And obviously, that's a little dramatic, but there is a reason people say that. There just seems to be a lot less big superstars in the past 5 years or so. Players just seem to be generally less talented, and when you compare the most recent era to past eras, yeah, there's almost objectively less star power across the entire sport, at least at the moment. Now, when you look at any time period in football's history, there always seems to be three separate groups of stars, split up by age. You have the young bulls, the wonder kids, the star boys, the people that's supposed to be the next generation of big names. Then you got the old heads, the unks, the former superstars who might still be good, but either way, they on their way out. Then you have the superstars that are in their primes, the biggest stars in the world at the moment who are in their best years still, entertaining everybody. And yeah, let's go back to a random year like around 2005 or 2006, for example. You got the young bulls, the wonder kids like Messi, Ronaldo, Wayne Rooney, Fernando Torres, Fabregas, Robinho, and plenty others. You got the old heads like Zidane, maybe like Luis Figo, Maldini, R9 was almost finished, Cafu was almost done, and plenty others. Then you have the stars in or around their prime. Ronaldinho, Eto'o, Kaká, Henry, Gerrard, Lampard, Del Piero, Totti. The world was overflowing with stars at their peak. Fast forward like 10 years or so, let's go to around like 2015. The old heads are on their way out the door. Pirlo went off to America. I think Kaká was already over here in America by then too. So was Drogba. Henry had just retired. Eto'o was about to be done. However, Messi was bugging out. Ronaldo was bugging out. Neuer, Zlatan, Sergio Ramos, Suarez, Alexis Sanchez. Who else? There was Robin, there was Aguero. I mean, the football world was literally overrun with superstars. There was no shortage of young bulls either. Hazard was like 23 or 24. Neymar was only like 23. Pogba was like 22. Isco and James Rodriguez were both in their early 20s. They were looking like the future of Madrid. Coutinho was in his early 20s, still at Liverpool. Dele Alli was still a teenager, but he just broken through for Tottenham. United fans were excited about their new teenager, Martial. KDB was like 24? Still pretty early in his career. Paulo Dybala looked like a guaranteed phenom. That one season where he played with Pogba, the 15-16 season, they was lighting shit up. The future of football was in good hands, and it looked like after the old guard moved on, there'd be a new generation overflowing with superstars. Except, no. I mean, there were still some excellent and all-time great players, don't get me wrong, but as many football fans have noticed, there weren't nearly as many world-class superstars that defined this recent era as there were in previous eras. When you look at the list of wonder kids and star boys from around 2015, it's not hard to see why. Half of them had their 15 seconds and then fell off or faded away. This created a bit of a gap, this extended stretch a few years back where the superstars were getting old, but the young wonder kids that were supposed to replace them were dropping like flies. Zlatan was in America by 2018, and sure, he came back to Milan a couple years later, but come on, he was already pushing 40. Robin was ready to hang it up by like 2018. Ribéry left Bayern around the same time. Iniesta dipped off to China in like 2018 too. Xavi was long gone by then. He ain't even wait to hit 35. He wrapped it up back in 2015. Van Persie left the top 5 leagues for good around that time. Basically, a lot of the old big names was dipping, and it was supposed to be time for a new era. It kind of feels like that big new era never actually came though. Most of the players who were supposed to hit their prime from around maybe 2018 to now just never did. Half of them don't even play anymore, even though they're mostly not that old. Pogba moved to United and there was all kinds of issues and turmoil before he eventually left in 2022. Nowhere near the player was believed he would become. Then there was the whole drugs ban at Juventus, and overall his career is a failure relative to his potential and talent. He's only 31. He was supposed to be the best midfielder in the world these past 5 years. Coutinho was only 32. Back when he was frying niggas at Liverpool, it looked like the next decade would be his. Instead, Barca didn't work out, and then there was that little Bayern trip. Eventually he ended up at Villa, and he was back in Brazil by just 31. Isco is still around. He was good for Betis last season. Didn't live up to any of the hype at Madrid though, and he rode the bench for years. James Rodriguez left after a few years for Bayern, but they let him go before too long too. Hazard was genuinely done by 28. Neymar got slaughtered by injuries, and even though when he played he was ridiculous, he regularly missed months and usually missed just under half the season on average since moving to PSG. Now, even though he's just 32, he's already in Saudi Arabia, and he's reached a point injury-wise where it looks like he'll never fully revive his career at all. Martial was washed by 25, same for Ali. Dybala is still around, and he's been good for Roma to be honest, but he never reached the heights anybody thought he would, and things fell apart for him at Juve. Of course, there's still big names like KDB, Salah, and Griezmann, maybe a couple others. But if you look at a lot of the other big superstars the last half decade or so, a good chunk of them are players from the previous era who had the longevity to stick around. Messi was winning Ballon d'Ors as recently as 2023. Ronaldo stuck around for a while. Kroos just now retired. Modric still kicking. Benzema won the 2022 Ballon d'Or. We literally don't have a Ballon d'Or winner born this century yet. Obviously, it's going to happen at some point. There's an influx of new superstars popping up across the world, and with wonder kids everywhere and the new generation starting to hit their stride, the incoming generation will hopefully replenish the list of world-class players around Europe. There's still the question, though, of what happened. Some people call that group of young stars that all fell off the missing generation, the generation that left a hole in football's history. But there's no way that was all just a coincidence, right? Me personally, I don't think so at all. In my opinion, that generation fell into the worst transitional period in the history of the sport because of two things: the rise of social media and the increasing importance of physicality in the sport. We talked about the second part in the attacking midfielders video a little while back, where we talked about how the position has transformed over the years and how the number 10 doesn't really exist anymore. Attacking midfielders no longer just sit in the hole scratching their ass till they get the ball. They have way more responsibility both pressing-wise and defensively overall now, and it's made the physical aspect of the position gradually more important than the technical aspect the more years went by. Juan Mata, for example, talked about how it affected him and how his kind of 10 was sort of phased out of the sport for a new, more modern kind of attacking midfielder. Kaká's career was basically done up by the time the shift hit full stride, but he also talked about this. He said he would probably be a box-to-box midfielder in today's game because his version of the 10 role isn't really a thing anymore. But if you're a young star breaking through as that shift started to happen, you're kind of left in a bit of a nasty place. You've grown up your whole life playing one way, and just as you make it to the top, the sport kind of just moves away from you. If you weren't able to transform yourself into a box-to-box midfielder or a different kind of attacking player, it was raps. It might be why so many of the wonder kids that fell off from this past era are attacking midfielders. Part of the reason Dele Alli's career spiraled downwards was because a lot of the things he was asked to do on the pitch, he couldn't or maybe just wouldn't do. Then the lazy narrative started and the dominoes started knocking each other over from there. Isco kind of gained the reputation of a fat ass who didn't have the work rate to keep his place at Madrid, especially when you look at who was in their midfield around that time. James Rodriguez was also a huge victim of the great attacking midfield shift. He simply couldn't keep up physically. He wasn't built to be a modern 10. All these guys and a few others kind of got caught up as football changed. I genuinely think if you stick Isco 20 years in the past, his career does not turn out the way it did. Dybala is a bit of a weird case because I don't think he ever really had the physical attributes to be a modern 10, but he wasn't really tied down to one role anyway, especially because of how lethal his finishing was. His fall off overall is just a lot more complicated because of what happened when Ronaldo came, and there was also some injury issues too. He's also still pretty good. He's only considered a failure because of his potential. Either way, the way physicality factors into the modern game in certain positions is extremely different than when these guys came up. Nowadays, a lot of the attacking midfielders who are breaking through are training from youth as modern AMs. They're used to it and prepared for it by the time they reach this level. You turn on an Arsenal game and Odegaard is speeding all over the pitch, breathing down defenders' necks while pressing, and then a minute later he's back by his own box defending. It's not even just limited to attacking midfielders. We constantly talk about how there's less flair and more focus on athleticism in the sport now because of how new tactics force players to do so much more on the pitch than in the past. We also probably should talk about how we're shortening careers too. Players' bodies are wearing down faster, they're recovering from injuries slower and getting hurt more frequently. What happened to Hazard seems so random on paper because he only played less than 34 league games for Chelsea one time when he was in the Prem. Then out of nowhere at the age of 28, his body just gave up. He stopped healing the way he used to, he slowed down, and he got fat as fuck. Just from the way he got ran through the ground and kicked to pieces over the years though, it was only a matter of time. Anybody with two eyes could see it. Nowadays, I definitely do think it's easier for injuries to take you out. The tactical shift didn't just hurt the sport entertainment-wise. More than all these different factors though, I still feel like social media is the real killer. It's so easy for fans to say, just don't let the noise get to your head. But we as fans will never understand how it feels for hundreds of thousands of people to just be going in on you online the second you do something wrong. Back then, of course, there were newspapers and articles or whatever, but there's never been a time period where we were forced to hear as many different people's opinions as now. Social media has taken ridiculous steps forward to the forefront of sports conversations in the last decade. It's hard enough to stay mentally well through press criticism, but when social media comes into play and you see thousands, sometimes even millions, getting on your ass daily for every single move, it's even harder to maintain mental well-being. It's way easier for young players to crumble and a million times harder to just quote-unquote tune out the noise. We often underestimate just how much damage pressure can do to a young player, whether it's harassment for bad performances or unrealistic expectations. Pogba United was one of the most ridiculous examples of straight-up scapegoating I've ever seen. Yeah, I remember when they started dogging him on live TV for making a New Year's post related to Islam? Bruh, let me go find the clip. That shit was so mind-boggling, bro.
On social media, he produced this post from a vehicle with that picture with the message, rather cryptically, best way to start 2020.
Well, I'd have to disagree. I think the best way to start 2020 would be on that pitch at the Emirates. Obviously, he's not fit, so that's not possible. But
What the fuck are they talking about? What are they talking about? Like, actually, what the fuck? How are people watching this and going, yeah, he's spitting? He said rather cryptically, as if it was like a bomb threat and not a New Year's post. These niggas got to be sick in the head, bro. Pogba constantly got into it with people in the media over social media, and it was clear that being picked on by fans affected him. Nicolas Pepe also talked about how social media and the media affected him, even with the fact that he wasn't on it much. His love for the sport was killed just hearing it secondhand. Imagine the chronically online players. Narratives that surround players can also be pushed even harder and spread way faster through social media, which older players didn't have to deal with. Dele Alli talked about it in his interview with Gary Neville.
What you see sometimes isn't the way it really is. I think, especially now with social media and all these things, we can really portray something that isn't real.
I genuinely feel like a lot of us don't see these people as actual human beings, so it's hard to factor how the way we talk about them affects not only how they play, but personally as well. That interview was dead one of the best I've ever watched. Gary Neville pissed me off sometimes, but he did a good job there, I can't lie. Me personally, I feel like it's because that generation grew up as social media was getting popular. They were mentally trained from young ages to be used to abuse and ridicule online. Social media started peaking in popularity when their careers already started, and it's possible that a lot of them weren't ready. On the other hand, we have young players today who grew up with social media and are probably more battle-tested. There's shit I see online every single day that would have been the end of the world a decade ago. The world's changed. People care less and less about shit the more time passes, for better or for worse. The youth of today are undoubtedly more prepared for online abuse than the generation that grew up mostly offline and then got ambushed with social media. Does that make sense? I feel like I'm articulating it well in my head, but it might not be coming across perfectly. The point is, the missing generation got caught at the worst possible crossroads. Some of them survived, and they're the faces of that short era, but the majority didn't, and that's why there's a lot less world-class players from that time period than the ones before. All these things add up to what I like to call the superstar burnout epidemic. Whether it's injuries, wear and tear, the game changing, or social media's effect on mental health, that specific generation got the worst of it because they got blindsided by all of it during the transitional period. All the what ifs from this time period are going to be looked back on with a lot of misery because of what could have been, and it's unfortunate. In different eras, some of them may have been all-time greats, but most of them ended up not becoming as much as they could have, and we'll all just have to come to terms with the fact that it was the right talent, but maybe the very wrong time.